From the shadows of Mount Olympus to the depths of the underworld, one name has echoed through the centuries with fear, awe, and misunderstanding: Hades. For most, he is the god of the dead, the dark ruler cloaked in gloom, a figure painted as cruel and merciless. Some even confuse him with the devil himself. But what if everything you know about Hades is wrong? What if the true story of this god is not of evil, but of order, balance, and even necessity? The Greeks never saw Hades as the enemy. He was no Satan, no tempter of souls. In fact, he was one of the three great rulers of the cosmos, alongside Zeus, who governed the skies, and Poseidon, who ruled the seas. Hades was given dominion over the unseen, the underworld, the realm of the departed. Yet while Zeus' thunderbolts and Poseidon's storms could be admired with awe, Hades' kingdom was feared, for it reminded mortals of the one truth they could not escape: death. And so, over centuries, storytellers and later traditions twisted Hades into something he never was. His name became synonymous with dread. His realm was confused with torment. But the truth is far more complex and far more fascinating. To understand Hades is to understand the very Greek view of life and death, of justice and destiny. The story begins not in darkness, but in war, the great Titanomachy. When the Olympian gods rose against the Titans, Hades fought alongside his brothers. It was Hades who wielded a helmet of invisibility, striking fear into the hearts of their enemies. Without him, Zeus could not have triumphed. Without him, Olympus would not have risen. When victory came, the three brothers drew lots for the realms of the universe. Zeus took the skies, Poseidon the seas, and Hades the underworld. Not exile, not punishment, but kingship. Hades became the ruler of a vast and inevitable kingdom, the land of shadows. But what kind of king was he? Here is where the truth diverges from the myth most people believe. Hades was not a tormentor of souls. He did not hunt mortals or delight in suffering. Instead, he maintained order. The souls of the dead were judged, not by him, but by the judges of the underworld: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. To the wicked went punishment in Tartarus, to the heroic went glory in the Elysian fields, and to most, a quiet eternity in the asphodel meadows. Hades did not choose their fate. He simply reigned over the balance. Yet one story would forever define him: the tale of Persephone. To the Greeks, this was not a tale of romance as later poets imagined, nor a tale of horror as modern minds often frame it. It was something more symbolic. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of fertility and the harvest, was taken by Hades to be his queen. Her descent into the underworld marked the coming of winter. Her return brought the spring. Through her, the Greeks explained the eternal cycle of life and death, decay and rebirth. Hades, far from being only a lord of shadows, became the keeper of this sacred rhythm. Still, the act itself left questions. Was it abduction? Was it destiny? Did Persephone choose her role? Some ancient hymns portray her as resisting, others as accepting her place as queen, seated beside Hades with power of her own. In either telling, it was not lust or cruelty that defined the union, but the inevitability of balance. Without Persephone's descent, the world would have no seasons. Without Hades, life would not understand death. And so the Greeks approached him with reverence, but also fear. His very name was rarely spoken, replaced with titles like Plowton, the giver of wealth, for all riches of the earth came from beneath the soil. Gold, silver, precious stones, these belonged to Hades' domain. Farmers prayed to him, for the ground that swallowed the dead also nourished the living. He was terrible, yes, but also generous in ways unseen. Yet time changed perception. Later cultures, blending Greek myth with new religions, twisted Hades into the shadow of hell. He was confused with Pluto, with Dis, with Satan himself. His kingdom was no longer balance but torment, his crown no longer regal, but infernal. But the Greeks knew the difference. To them, Hades was not evil, he was necessary. He was the reminder that all men, kings or peasants, must walk the same path. And within that path lies power. The myths tell us of heroes who ventured into his realm. Orpheus, seeking Eurydice. Heracles, capturing Cerberus. Theseus, trapped in the chair of forgetfulness. Each tale speaks not of Hades as a villain, but as a gatekeeper. His permission, his rules, his justice were always present. To cheat death was nearly impossible, for even gods could not overturn the laws of his domain. Perhaps that is the true reason Hades was feared, not because he was cruel, but because he was absolute. You could bargain with Zeus, you could plead with Poseidon, but with Hades there was no escape, no compromise. Death comes to all, and his kingdom waits. Even in the eyes of the ancients, Hades was not isolated. He was part of a greater system, a cosmic order that placed each god where they belonged. To know Hades is to know that the Greeks never separated life and death, but wove them together in a single fabric. And if we look closely, we begin to realize that his story is not only myth, it is philosophy. It is a meditation on the meaning of mortality, on the justice of existence, and on the strange, inevitable hospitality of the grave. To truly understand Hades, we must linger in his kingdom, where the boundary between myth and philosophy blurs. For the Greeks, the underworld was not simply a place of shadows, but a mirror of human life itself. It was structured, divided, and ordered, each soul guided to its rightful place. At the very heart of this cosmic geography was the idea of balance. Just as the world above had mountains and seas, seasons and harvests, so too the world below had rivers, plains, and rulers. Nothing in Greek thought existed without its counterpart, and death was not an exception to life, but its continuation. The Greeks imagined the underworld as vast, almost infinite. Beyond the 5 rivers lay regions of destiny, the asphodel meadows where ordinary souls drifted in quiet anonymity, the fields of punishment where oath-breakers, traitors, and the arrogant paid their dues, and the Elysian fields a paradise of light where heroes and the virtuous enjoyed eternal peace. This division shows us that Hades was not chaos. He presided over a moral landscape, not in judgment, like a god of law, but as custodian of the paths souls would take. Judgment was said to belong to others. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, the 3 mortal kings transformed into judges of the dead. Hades did not dictate their decisions. He merely received the souls after their fates were spoken. In this light, Hades becomes a god of paradox. He is feared but fair, distant yet ever-present. Unlike Zeus, who was quick to anger, or Poseidon, who unleashed storms on a whim, Hades never wavered. He was consistent, unchanging, relentless. That constancy made him both terrifying and strangely comforting. For mortals could never predict the storms of Olympus, but they could predict death. And in Hades, death had a face, a name, and a keeper. And what of Persephone, his queen? Her story is among the most famous in mythology. The daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, carried away by Hades into the underworld. To many, this seems like an act of violence, a kidnapping. But the deeper Greeks went into the myth, the more symbolic it became. For when Persephone descended, the earth above grew barren, crops withered, and Demeter's grief starved the land. Only when Persephone returned each spring did fertility bloom again. Thus her time in the underworld was not merely captivity, it was the cycle of the seasons, the eternal return of life from death. She became not just queen of the dead, but the goddess of renewal, a figure whose dual existence connected the grave to the field, the shadow to the sun. Together, Hades and Persephone formed a strange, profound harmony. He represented finality. She represented return. He was the inevitability of death. She was the promise of rebirth. This union was not a distortion of love, but a cosmic balance. Their marriage was not only myth, it was the explanation of the seasons, the very rhythm of life on Earth. And yet, mortals still tried to defy this rhythm. Heroes and kings dared to descend into Hades' realm, challenging his unbreakable laws. Consider Theseus and Pirithous, two companions who sought to claim Persephone herself. Their arrogance brought them to Hades' throne, demanding what no mortal should. But Hades was not deceived. He welcomed them, offered them the customary seat of hospitality, and then bound them there forever. Theseus would eventually be rescued by Heracles, but Pirithous remained trapped in the underworld, a living warning carved into myth. Do not challenge the king of death. The pattern is clear in every tale. Hades is not a trickster god. He does not deceive. He waits, and those who come before him reveal themselves. The arrogant are punished by their own hubris. The faithful may be granted mercy. The brave may pass through, but never without scars. Even philosophy found its reflection in his myth. Plato, in his dialogues, used the figure of Hades to explore the immortality of the soul. To the philosopher, Hades was not just a god, but a concept, the destination of all reasoning about life and death. In the Phaedo, Socrates speaks of death not as an end, but as a purification, a return of the soul to its true home. In this way, Hades' kingdom becomes not a prison but a passage, a gate through which mortals pass to what lies beyond. Later poets would expand these images. Virgil's Aeneid paints the underworld with vivid detail, the gates of ivory and horn, the wailing of unburied souls, the punishments of the wicked, and the rewards of the just. In his telling, Hades' realm is both terrifying and awe-inspiring, filled with lessons for the living. Aeneas does not go there to conquer, but to learn, to see the destiny of Rome. In this way, Hades is cast again not as a villain, but as a teacher, his domain the ultimate school of truth. Yet myths are mirrors of their time, and as the centuries passed, Hades' image shifted. We must enter his realm to truly understand him. The underworld was not a single place of torment, but a vast and layered kingdom. The Greeks imagined 5 rivers flowing through it, each one carrying a meaning that defined the journey of the soul. The river Styx, black and unyielding, was the oath of the gods themselves. To swear by Styx was binding, even to Zeus. The river Lethe, the waters of forgetfulness, promised peace to weary spirits, but also robbed them of memory. The river Acheron, the river of woe, was crossed by Charon the ferryman, who demanded payment in the form of a coin placed in the mouth of the dead. Those without coin, it was said, wandered the shores for 100 years. The river Phlegethon burned with fire, a reminder of the passions that consumed life. And finally, the river Cocytus, the river of lamentation, echoing with the cries of the lost. All of this was not chaos. It was order, structured and unbreakable. Hades did not rule with cruelty, but with inevitability. Cerberus, the 3-headed hound, stood at the gates not to torment, but to prevent escape. Every creature, every shadow, every law of the underworld spoke of boundaries, of the unshakable truth that once you entered, you belonged to Hades. He was not your judge, but your king. But mortals have always hated boundaries, and many stories tell of those who tried to defy him. Consider Sisyphus, the cunning king who tricked Thanatos, the very personification of death, into chains, halting mortality across the earth. For a time, no one died. Heroes who should have fallen in battle lived on, and the balance was shattered. But the gods would not allow this theft of order. When Thanatos was freed, Sisyphus was cast into the underworld, condemned to roll his boulder for eternity, a punishment not from Hades' cruelty, but from the violation of universal law. Or think of Orpheus, the great musician whose lyre could charm even stones. His love, Eurydice, was taken by a serpent's bite. Refusing to accept her fate, he descended into Hades' realm. his music softening the heart of Persephone, and some say, even Hades himself. So moved were they that Eurydice was allowed to return on one condition. Orpheus must not look back until both had left the underworld. But love is impatient, and doubt overcame him. At the last moment he turned, and she was lost forever. Again, Hades was not cruel. He had granted a chance. It was Orpheus who failed to trust. Heracles too walked through those shadows. As one of his labors, he was commanded to bring Cerberus to the surface. Unlike others, he did not trick or bribe Hades. He asked, and Hades agreed, but only if Heracles could subdue the hound with his own strength. In this story, we glimpse Hades as a king of law who honored requests when approached with respect. Even heroes could not simply take from him. They had to prove themselves. These tales reveal something that has been forgotten. Hades was not chaos, but cosmos. He was not a villain, but a sovereign. If Zeus ruled the thunder that could kill with a strike, if Poseidon ruled the waves that could swallow ships whole, then Hades ruled the truth that all life ends. Mortals did not hate him because he was unjust. They feared him because he was final. Yet myths have a way of changing shape over time, and Hades' image was twisted further as Rome absorbed Greece. The Romans called him Pluto, the giver of wealth, and sometimes Dispotter, the rich father of the earth's treasures. In these names, he was not darkness, but abundance. Still, the underworld carried fear, and poets began to blur the lines between the land of the dead and the punishments of sinners. When Christianity rose centuries later, this fusion grew stronger. Hades became hell, the king became a tormentor, and eventually his very name became interchangeable with the devil. But if you return to the ancient hymns, the Orphic verses, and the rituals of the Greeks, you find another picture. Hades was invoked in burial rites not as an enemy, but as a guardian. Offerings were made to him not in hatred, but in solemn respect. He was the hospitable one, for he received all mortals in the end. He was the unseen giver of grain, for without death there is no harvest, without burial no rebirth. In fact, some cults worshipped him alongside Persephone as deities of mystery and transformation, hinting at the eternal cycle of life beyond life. And perhaps that is why Hades remains so fascinating. He is the god we pretend to hate, but cannot ignore. For in his shadow we see ourselves fragile, temporary, striving against fate, yet bound by it. His myths are not warnings of cruelty, but reflections of truth. In the story of Sisyphus, we see the futility of rebellion. In the story of Orpheus, we see the cost of doubt. In the story of Persephone, we see the eternal return of life from death. The early Greeks saw him as neutral, stern, inevitable. The later Romans softened him, calling him Pluto, associating him with wealth, both the hidden riches of the earth and the abundance of crops that sprouted from its soil. But as Christianity rose, the shadow deepened. Hades became synonymous with hell, his throne conflated with that of Satan, his realm twisted from a place of order into a pit of fire. In this transformation, the ancient nuance was lost. The Greeks never imagined Hades as the devil. That was a story written later, by hands eager to draw sharp lines between light and dark. And yet, even in that distortion, something of his original truth remains. For Hades still embodies the inescapable. He is still the one god who does not court mortals, who does not beg for temples or sacrifices, who does not interfere with wars or politics. He waits silently in his kingdom. Every mortal, whether king or beggar, priest or soldier, will meet him. In that way, Hades remains the most democratic of gods. From the beginning, we saw Hades not as a villain, but as a keeper. He does not ride the storms of Zeus or stir the seas like Poseidon. He rules in silence, seated upon his dark throne, governing a kingdom where every mortal must one day arrive. His power is not the flash of lightning, nor the crash of waves. It is inevitability itself. The myths revealed his paradox. To some, he was a figure of terror, the god who seized Persephone, the unseen force waiting beneath the earth. Yet to others, he was a guarantor of order, the one who ensured that the soul of a king and the soul of a beggar found equal place in death. Where mortals saw tragedy, the Greeks saw balance. Where mortals saw despair, they found explanation. For the seasons, for the cycles of harvest, for the justice of the cosmos. We walked with Orpheus as he begged for Eurydice, and saw how Hades could be moved to compassion, yet remained unwavering when mortal weakness failed the test. We heard the arrogance of Theseus and Pirithous, bound forever by their own hubris in the very halls of his palace. We stood with Aeneas as he journeyed below, learning that the underworld is not a prison, but a mirror, a place where the living come face to face with truth. Philosophers turned him into a symbol. Plato saw in Hades the purification of the soul, a destination of thought and reason. Poets painted his kingdom with rivers of fire and meadows of asphodel. And later, his name would be reshaped into something darker, fused with images of hell and eternal punishment. Yet the Greeks never feared him as the enemy of humanity. They knew him instead as an eternal boundary, strict, fair, incorruptible. And so, Hades remains. In every age, his presence lingers, whether as a god, a symbol, or a shadow. He is the reminder that power is not always loud, that rule is not always violent, and that the greatest inevitability is not war, nor empire, nor storm, but death. He is the God who waits. He is the silence that follows the last heartbeat. He is the keeper of the underworld, not to torment, but to hold the line between the living and the dead. And in this silence, in this shadow, the question remains, do we see Hades as a curse, or as a truth that sets us free? Hades was never the villain, only the keeper of the final truth. He sits in silence, unseen yet unshakable, reminding us that all journeys end beneath his shadow. But every shadow has another story. What of Persephone, the queen who walks between two worlds? What of the souls who dared to challenge death itself, or the mysteries whispered in the Eleusinian rites that promised hope beyond the grave? The tale of Hades is only the beginning. The underworld holds countless secrets still waiting to be revealed. Join us in the next descent, as we uncover the mysteries that even the gods feared to speak aloud.